Hey everybody, welcome back to the Game Addicted Show. We are on episode cuatro, numero 4, and college football is among us, so I thought it'd be a special treat to finally dive into some mathematics. We're going to go full algebraic, and we're going to break down my formula for going into the college football rankings for the season. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, so first let's jump into some definitions. First thing I want to define is strength of schedule. Now, I actually had to look this up on Wikipedia, but strength of schedule essentially is just taking the total record of your opponents and your opponent's opponents. And this is actually a really useful tool for being able to compare teams that don't necessarily play each other, which, as you know, in college football, there's 130 Division One programs, so it's really difficult to compare teams out like in the Pac-12 compared to teams out like the ACC, SEC, because they don't play each other very often. When they do, you're only able to compare maybe one or two teams, if that, in a single season. So strength of schedule is going to play a pretty big role when looking at rankings and the way I'm going to calculate them. And that brings us to strength of victory. Now, strength of victory is using strength of schedule, but we're only accounting for the teams that you beat, not everybody that you've played. So this is actually something that's currently used in the NFL to decide tiebreakers within divisions. It's not, as far as my knowledge, something that's implemented in college football. From what I read up when the BCS was around, they were using strength of schedule and using weighted averages according to teams that were perceived to be in a stronger conference. And I also believe that they used the amount of NFL talent that was put through like conferences like in the SEC, which I believe during the BCS era led all conferences in NFL talent that was drafted. So strength of victory is going to play also a really big role in the calculations of our rankings. All right, so now we're about to math it up. So to calculate strength of schedule, you're going to take your opponent's record, OR, multiply that by 2, and add your opponent's of opponent's record, and take that total and divide it by 3. And that's going to give us our strength of schedule. Next, we're going to look at strength of victory. Now, strength of victory actually uses the same formula as strength of schedule, but we're only accounting for the teams that we've beaten. So we're going to multiply 2 times beaten opponent's record plus beaten opponent's of opponent's record and dividing that by 3. Now, this is where things get interesting. So, one aspect I want to include into my formula is strength of production. Now, as far as research I've done, I haven't seen anyone that actually accounts for total offense and defense in this manner, but all strength of production is we're going to take the average ranking of our total offense and total defense for all our opponents, and we're going to calculate it. So, in a few slides, I'll show you how that works. But before we do that, I want to jump into strength of victory production, which, as you guessed, we're only accounting for the production of teams we've beaten, not all teams we played. So this is, again, looking at a team's total offense and defensive ranking and averaging them together to give us a score. So here we are again with our formulas. You're already familiar with this. We're going to calculate strength of production the same way as we did strength of schedule, which is going to be 2 times opponent's production plus opponent's of opponent's production divided by 3. And yep, you guessed it, strength of victory production is calculated the same exact way. So it's 2 times BOP plus boop divided by 3. And that gives us strength of victory production. Okay, so by now you guys are all fed up with all this math and definitions, and you're like, I just can't take anymore. Well, hold on, because this is it. This is the big, super secret formula I've been holding off to share with everybody. All I am doing is taking a team's strength of victory and their strength of victory production, which again is a combination of their total offense and defense production on the field, combining that together and giving us an average where we could come up with a ranking for all 130 teams. Now, I thought this would be a fun way to do a week to week ranking because now I think this would better encompass what a team's been able to accomplish as far as their resume with all the opponents they've beaten and looking at the production on the field. So both of those I think would give us a pretty strong look of what team deserves to be where, opposed to right now where the system is mostly based off of preseason projections, and then as teams win or lose, we adjust the rankings within our preset top 25 system. And sometimes you end up with a big old mess. So with this, we're starting the season off with a clean slate. Everybody's treated equally, and rankings will vary drastically week to week. But every week that passes, rankings will become slightly more and more accurate until the end of the season, where we could see what these formulas come up with. Now, I was thrown a bit of a curveball when coming up with this formula, and that's with the treatment of FCS schools. FCS schools may play a few Division One programs throughout their regular season, but the majority of the schedule is going to be made up of schools that play within their same division. Now, you might be asking, Alex, why would this cause a problem with your calculation? They still play other teams, they have wins and losses. Well, here's the problem. Generally speaking, FCS schools do not have the same resources that a Division One program can offer. And because of that, it's hard to argue that their wins and losses are as valuable as a team that plays Division One football. So to combat this, I came up with something that might be considered controversial, but I believe it is the fairest way to treat these schools. And that is for any school that plays Division One program, I treat them as winless teams that are ranked last in total offense. Now, there could be an argument that could be made about some FCS schools that might be better than some smaller schools that are outside of your Power 5 conferences, but generally speaking, those schools still have more resources than your FCS schools. So, for that reason, I think this is the fairest compromise I come up with on how to treat these schools where we could be fair to everybody. But I do understand that some FCS schools are definitely stronger than others. So I don't know if there'll ever be a perfect solution to this, but at least for this season, I'd like to test out the formula in this matter. And if this channel ever takes off and we survive to another season, maybe we'll change things up. So I would definitely love your input in the future on how to handle these schools. Now, logically, you might be thinking, now, Alex, did this formula solve the crisis we have in college football, where certain networks come up with preseason polls in order to promote teams that they have network ties to in order to gain financial success in the future by pushing them to bigger bowl games and generating larger TV revenue? ESPN. Oh, sorry about that. Something caught in my throat. Anyways, no, unfortunately, this system has its limitations. Now, I still promote that there should be a human element when coming up with rankings because there are some parts of looking at strength of schedule and a team's production isn't captured. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these limitations. Now, first, I'd like to point out that this formula is actually supposed to be used as a resume model, meaning that we're only capturing what a team's accomplished. And leading to our second point, this is not a predictive model where we're looking to guess what a team might do in the future against future opponents. So save your gas money, don't go out to Vegas and start placing bets right away, because this formula will not help you in that. But that does bring us to our next point, and that's home and away games. Now, unfortunately, this formula treats all games the same, so you're not rewarded for winning a big away game, and you're not penalized for winning maybe a game where you have a strong home field advantage because of loud crowd noise. Uh, Also, on that note, this formula does not account for stadium noise. And the reason I don't have a metric included for that is because it's kind of difficult to measure the advantage that playing in Ann Arbor in the big house, where you have really loud stadium noise and really tough weather conditions at times, versus, let's say, a smaller school, not to pick on anybody, but like Wake Forest that has a smaller stadium, and those elements and stadium noise may not have as a big effect on the game. But another thing we should also look at is player injuries, because if a player is injured, like let's say your star quarterback, and your performance greatly suffers, this formula is still going to treat your production the same as it was in any other school. It's not going to give you any slack for having any injuries to important role players throughout the regular season. Now, I do want to reiterate probably the most controversial part of this formula, which again is the treatment of FCS schools. Um, I want to stand by this for this season. I'm going to treat FCS schools as winless teams with no production. We're going to see how it goes, see if this matches up somewhat to the final rankings that the voters come up with, and also get your input throughout the season to see if you like this model of the formula, or if you have some great suggestions on how to improve it. I am all ears because I'm really excited to test this out and kind of get feedback on the performance of this formula throughout the season. And that's it. You guys survived another video. Thanks for sticking it out. Now, today's video was sponsored by puppies. Go hug one. They're adorable. They're going to make your life better. Trust me on that. Anyways, jokes aside, what do you guys think of the formula? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Should I just go back to not making videos and sitting on the couch while eating Hot Pockets? Let me know in the comments down below. Any suggestions are always welcome. As for next week's video, I'm hoping to dive into a first set of rankings, so that's very exciting. We'll see how things shake up. Forewarning, they're going to be wild because we have very little data to go off. But until then, thank you all, and I'll see you all next week.